My next guest in this episode is Ryan Scott. Among the long list of interviews that I've been doing recently with amazing leaders who I have met as part of the Teach Better Mastermind, Ryan is a teacher turned administrator, spent some time as a principal, now a high school assistant principal, podcaster in his own right. Ryan, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself, who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Dan, thank you so incredibly much for having me today. It is, Martin Luther King Day, so I definitely want to talk just a little bit about Martin Luther King. As far as this is just a super important day, particularly within the context of the last year or so. But yes, I am a high school AP from the beautiful and you never know what type of season you're going to have in Western Kentucky. I am in Dixon, Kentucky, which is Webster County, an administrator at Webster County High School. Prior to coming here, I was a principal at an elementary for 2 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years as a elementary teacher, spanning the ranges from kindergarten to math RTI, and I dabbled and did quite a bit in teaching phonics and teaching kids to read, which was phenomenal.
Well, I guess let me ask you this on the onset here. I know that we're recording a little ways away from when this episode will actually be published. But what is school looking for? Looking what is school looking like for you these days? In person, hybrid, remote.
Well, right now we are hybrid. We came back after the Christmas break. We did a week of virtual, and then we jumped into hybrid. We've been in hybrid for 2 weeks now.
Now, when you say you came back after Christmas break, was the beginning of the year all remote and then you came in hybrid after, or was it like we took a little bit of a break just around the holiday time and now we're back to hybrid?
So the beginning of December, we went 100% remote, and we stayed that way until, let's see, the after the first week of January, and now we have transitioned to the hybrid model. Now, in our district, we have a hybrid model, an in-person model, a virtual model, and a remote model.
How's that working out? Just curious.
It's going pretty good. In my role, I primarily have been tasked with making sure those virtual kids. So these are the kids that are at home 100% of the time, working on Edgenuity to do all of their coursework, and it's kind of been my job, what we're calling the orange and the red list. So it's our kids that have kind of dropped off the face of the earth or fallen behind. Um, so I've really been able to, in this particular season, ramp up my relationships and my connections before content theory, not theory, but practice to try to motivate these kids to stay where they need to be.
Can I ask you to be a little more specific there? Like, what are the kind of things that you're doing? What sort of tricks do you have up your sleeve to do that? I was actually like minutes before we started recording here. I was actually talking to my wife about the fact that I just took a look at some numbers that came out of the most recent board meeting here in the town that I live in, and I was shocked to see how many students are opting, or families are opting for students to be remote, and it was a much higher number, like set over 70% of the middle school and high school students versus 25% at our lowest elementary school, K1 and 2, and I think about 40% at our 3, 4, and 5 school. But I think the problem with that, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think otherwise, is that parents and families, obviously, when they need to continue working and doing their thing, feel like middle school and high school students are old enough to be by themselves. Therefore, they might be responsible enough to do all the things that their teachers are asking them to do. But we know right
They're not.
now, especially, yeah, especially at the middle school and high school level, I would think, students are not engaging. They're not on computers and cameras as much as they should be, not completing their assignments as much as they should be, and it's really tough. And I know that that is not unique to my town, my school, your school. It's everywhere. So just wondering, I guess, if you might be able to share some of what you're doing to help engage students.
Yeah, so a couple things to that point. I tell staff and I tell people around here all the time, we are for some reason surprised when kids act like kids. Middle school and high school kids, even though some of those kids, some of those seventh graders might be taller than me, might be shaving, might have arm hair and underarm hair and everything else, but they are at the end of the day still kids, and kids need structure. Kids need routine. And in the light of where we're at now, especially when those kids are, like you said, tasked or asked to stay home by themselves, then we really wonder why they're falling behind. And in my experience, I'm not just seeing kids that come from homes with poor home lives. These are kids across the gamut. And what I've really been surprised with, a lot of our kids that are doing not so well are the ones that come from really, really good households, or prior to this were straight A students. Um, One thing we sometimes fail to give credence to is a lot of these kids are also tasked with watching brothers and sisters while they are home, and then we are surprised that they fall behind. We talk about stress and we talk about our body's response: fight, flight, or freeze. Well, when kids get stressed, they freeze up. And one thing I think we have learned, or I have learned, is that procrastination, really at the root cause of procrastination, is that freeze mechanism. So a lot of these kids, they're not intentionally not turning in homework. The stresses of life and the stresses of reality, they are freezing up. And so what I have really tried to make it a point, whether this is right or wrong, some districts have policies against um, friending kids on Facebook or on Twitter or on social media and whatever. But I have kind of so I have kind of went against the grain on that, because if we are to reach these kids, we have to reach them on their level. And our students, that is how they interact. They interact on social media. Um, I get their phone numbers, I text them, I call them, I shoot them messages on Facebook. Just, how are you doing? I ask about them. Um, if I am monitoring their progress, I see they, had a really good day of work. I'll shoot them a message. I'll shoot them a voice message saying, "Hey, man, I saw you painted. You did really good on that lesson today. You got through it. You spent 4 hours today." Um, so that's kind of what I've done. And then also during December, I did this initiative um, where I asked some of my friends. I went used the social media route to get donations, and then I reached out to some of my most struggling kids, and I asked them to shoot me a Amazon list of 3 things that total $100 that would make you happy. So like nothing to buy for someone else. I had several single mothers. I said, nothing for your baby. This is for you to make you happy, because in my opinion, those kids have lost hope. They have a low hope coefficient. So reaching out to them, showing that we care, showing that we're in their corner, building that relationship, um, for the most part, has really helped.
That's great. I think that's really admirable. Again, at this point, I think almost anything that anyone is doing is more than enough to try and engage students and to keep just to keep school going at this point. So I really respect that. I did want to, kind of flip the switch a little bit, shift gears, because as I mentioned when I introduced you, you are a fellow podcaster. I know it's a little bit soon in the podcasting journey for you, but you have this big ed idea, and it actually reminds me of I have a friend who's also a podcaster, Brad Schreffler, who does the Planning Period podcast, and he kind of asks his same three questions to all of his guests, and one of them is like, "What's the biggest problem in education?" And so he coined the phrase like the big Q in EDU, and so
Oh,
that kind of
cool. That's
reminds me
cool.
of yeah, that kind of reminds me of what he's doing as well. But yours is a little bit different in the sense that you're trying to correct me if I'm wrong, trying to look at people who have sort of their own individual kind of unique vision or mission for how they want to improve and transform improve and transform education, and that idea is basically what they want to accomplish, let's say, right? So how's it going so far, and what are you learning, I guess, so far in when you talk to guests and when you get to talk to people about the big idea that they have?
Yeah, I have I've always kind of been one of those people that um I guess I like to stretch the boundaries. I like to think big. I'm very vision driven. But as you probably know, most of the time people that are very vision driven need help with people that are very passion driven. Sometimes we can have the best visions, but I'm not exactly sure how to get there you know so the I guess the podcast idea of the podcast is to get one person's vision out there, just get it out there into the world, and with the hope that someone will attach to it, will be passionate about what they're saying, and then those two people can connect and get the ball rolling. What I have learned through this, number one, is that podcasting is extremely addicting. I love talking to like-minded people. um, I think deep down, most of us have ideas, but I think sometimes we feel like we shouldn't share them, either because of maybe a professional environment they're in that's just not very conducive to thinking outside of the box. Maybe there's some anxiety within that person. But at the end of the day, all of those people, in my opinion, want to change the world. So let's get their stuff out there. I have met some really cool people. Today, I'm actually recording episode number 4, but I think I have enough guests lined out that I'm going to get over that magic 7, because I've been told that 7 is the magic number for podcasts to keep it rolling. So I think I'm going to do that. But I've just really, really, really enjoyed meeting all of these people in the Edgesphere and out in Twitterverse, and um, you know, get enough of us together, and we're going to change the world.
That's great, man. Actually, I'm hoping that you'll indulge me a little bit here. I was looking to kind of turn the tables on you. Do you have kind of that big idea, or that one thing that you, whether it's something that you're just really passionate about, that you bring with you to your work and at your school, or maybe just that bigger vision that you have for education? What do you think would be like your big ed idea?
So there's a couple of them. I'll hit real quick on rural schools. Um, our rural America is literally dying. At least where we're from, tax base has just disseminated. We used to be a very, very affluent county because of coal. Well, that's gone, and there's not really anything ever coming in to take its place. So one of my ideas is that rural education has to be a little bit different than urban education. Now, I don't mean like the pedagogy side. I just mean what our stresses are, what we stress. To me, especially at the secondary level, our high schools really should be gearing their courses towards their communities. I know locally we only have about 30% of our kids that go to college, but we keep stressing AP curriculum. To me, that's a little counterintuitive, because we're just uh, essentially we're feeding the brain drain. So instead, I would like to see rural communities focusing much more heavily on the CTE side, um, building more of the co-ops. I would like to see investment in broadband, so that like I tell people every day, we're about 2 hours from Nashville. There is no reason that somebody here cannot telework into Nashville, do some type of coding, computer work in Nashville, bring a Nashville paycheck, and then spend it here locally. That type of economy would be absolutely transformative. Um, Next idea, and I'm going to stop it here because I've got tons of ideas. That's kind of selfishly why I had the podcast. I think our three levels of education need to be specifically geared to certain things. Right now, it's like every K through 12 has the same standards, but we go a little bit deeper. We do something a little bit deeper with that standard. To me, at its base, elementary needs to work on SEL. It needs to work on overcoming the epidemic of learned helplessness that we don't talk about. It needs to really be geared toward the psychology of getting these kids, well, because we have 50% of kids coming into kindergarten in poverty. Now we have 50% of kids with those side effects of poverty. One being learned helplessness, two being social and emotional intelligence deficits. So to me, at the K through 5 level or K through 6, whatever you are, that's what our elementary should really stress. And then on top of that, the basics, phonics, numeracy, um, writing, the very basics, and let's get them to mastery. Then at the middle school level, let's start throwing in some collaboration, some communication, some of those 5 C's, sprinkle them in there. And then at the high school level, it should all be about application. Like it should be about competencies. It should be about designing projects, real world applications. Because I feel like what we're doing, I mean, let's be honest, it's not really working. Um, and I think we're trying to do too much, too fast. And instead, I have this idea of slow down early to speed up later.
I love that, and it's a little timely in the sense that I've actually seen 2 different things, or one I might have heard on a podcast, very recently, like over the last 2 or 3 days, that speak to the points that you're making. One of them was how I think it was schools in China, maybe somewhere in Asia, where, like, quite literally the goal of the first 2 or 3 years sorry, um, when students are in the lower elementary grades is, like you said, the SEL component and just learning how to be a student,
Learn. Yeah,
and get along with other kids and like the real basics, like the fundamentals. But I don't mean fundamentals academically; those kind of are secondary. And yes, they work on them, but it's not the primary goal of those grade levels and those age levels. And then the other thing that you mentioned was about um, each grade band focusing on different things. I don't think I've ever really heard it put like that before, and I really appreciate that. But what I have heard, and I think I was just listening to a podcast within the last couple days where someone was really emphasizing this. For a long time, it has seemed like what each grade band really is focused on, and I'm not saying it's right, clearly it's not, is just to get students ready for that next grade band.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
the elementaries, oh, you're gonna, now in middle school, you're gonna have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different teachers in all different subject areas, and we got to get you ready for that. In middle school, it's we got to get you ready for high school because those teachers are going to give you deadlines and you have to meet them. And if you don't, there might be consequences. And then college, it's like you're going to choose your own schedule and you might have, assignments thrown at you, or maybe you just get like dates and deadlines and you got to really work hard and your professors aren't going to help you. Like it's the same thing. But um, I definitely appreciated the point you said too about like, let's just slow down and really think hard about developmentally where kids are at in those grade bands and really how do we take what we know about the development of kids and meet that with sort of more of that real world relevancy. I think that's how I would put it.
Yeah, so I think we have So one of my things, if schooling looks the same way now as it did when we were in school, then we are failing. We are doing something drastically different. The society is different. The world is different. The economy is different. Um, when I say this, and I when I say this, I really, really mean this. Our purpose of education is not the same as it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. At that time, it was content driven because it could be content driven. We had the family structure to be able to teach life as it is now. And I tell my people all the time, um, we literally raise kids. If you think about it, if you really take the time to think about it, homes that have two working parents, how long do they actually see those kids every single day? And I'm guilty just as, I mean, I have four kids of my own. I get home from work at 5 o'clock. We rush to do the dinner, then we rush for baths, then we rush for books. We might get an hour on the couch together. So, what truly in those 3 hours am I teaching to my own girls about how to be a successful adult? It is not the same as it used to be, where you had one parent at home with the children all the time. Society was much different. So if you really think about education, education has to be set up to raise these kids now. It has to be. Um, and we also flip the script when we have here in the United States 20% of our kids living in poverty. And then in Finland, which has the greatest education system of the world based on all kinds of different metrics, their poverty rate's only 5%. Now, I'm not saying that's causation, but it could be correlation. Um, and is that because of the economy or is it because of the familial structure? I don't know, but I think one thing we really need to start talking about is the purpose of education for laying down those foundations that, like I said, the families used to be able to do, but quite honestly, we aren't able to do anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think a lot of what drives me, personally and professionally as well, is getting kids prepared for life beyond school, and like you said, how differently the world looks now than it did before. I think, we mentioned the podcasting thing a little while ago about how it's addicting and stuff like that. I mean, those of you listening to this show right now, first of all, thank you. But then, I'm thinking that this is probably not the only podcast you listen to, and
Sure.
perhaps you yourself are a creator of a podcast. And when I think about that kind of a shift that has been made in the world over the last handful of years, where anybody can have a platform, whether it's an audio podcast, a YouTube channel where you're pushing out video, blogging, writing books. I mean, I don't know about you. I feel like there are new education books, blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels like popping up every single day.
Everywhere, yeah.
And sometimes it might, to me, I don't know, I'll admit it might feel like a little bit of an information overload, because I do suffer from a little bit of a fear of missing out. So I feel like I need to try and consume everything.
Yeah,
Um,
sure, I get it.
but it's amazing, and, I think we mentioned this, on the podcast before, especially when I had a conversation with, Dr. Saba Kidwai about, the World Economic Forum and where they've projected the world will be in the next few years and what skills students really should be coming out of school with, including even social influence. So we mentioned the 4 or 5 Cs. Yeah, that's important, that's really important, but also let's project and predict where the world is going to be several years down the road, 10 years down the road, and try and prepare for that. And clearly, schools haven't done that. Now, again, we're recording well ahead of when this episode will be published, but we're 2 days away from a new administration in our government, which includes having an educator in the White House as our
That's
new
right.
first lady. and my home state of Connecticut's own, I guess, former education department
Saw that. Yeah, I'm excited about
secretary.
that.
I don't know what I honestly don't know what his title was beforehand, but he's becoming our new education secretary, and so we'll finally get someone back in that position who really belongs to be there as well as an educator and someone who went, climbed the ranks in education.
That's
So
exactly right. Yeah.
I'm I'm optimistic. I am. I don't know if we'll get to all the things that you and I have talked about here in this short conversation, but I'd like to think that I'm hopeful and I'm positive about at least heading back in the right direction. That's all that's all I'll say about that. Hopefully.
Well, any direction from the direction it's been in is going to be in the right direction.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I
No,
think
but I
our
think
yeah.
go ahead, Brett. Go ahead.
No, you first.
I was just going to say, one of the books I read recently, I can't remember what it was because I read so much. Um, said that we do a really really good job of getting our kids ready for college, as far as taking a test for college, but a really really bad job of getting our kids actually ready for college and life. I mean, I think that's what you're speaking to. Um, I think, I told my teachers the other day, if you are just delivering content, we are failing, because one thing this has shown us is that a computer can deliver content. So if we cannot differentiate ourselves from a computer, we are going to be automated, along with 70% of our jobs, I think, is what the projection was for the next 20 years. And that is a scary thing for me. So, in what way are educators going to flip the script and essentially be prescriptive and you know based on the world that we are at now, kind of what you're saying. um, and I know everything I'm reading is about the skills. We've got to be churning out kids with skills. We've got to be churning kids out with critical thinking, kids with those things that we um, that are honestly our world needs. So I'm excited, like you. I think these next 4 years we're going to have a different emphasis. Um, I just hope the powers to be let the box get blown up a little bit.
Listen, I'm gonna end it right there because I think that wraps up everything we're trying to say nicely. Optimistic for change, optimistic that our education system will ultimately catch up to, as we've mentioned here, our economy and our society, whether it's rural, urban, anything. Just recognizing the place that schools serve in the world, um, more of like a meta kind of approach. But
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I definitely think we've gotten away from that from far too long. So, man, I really appreciate the conversation, and congratulations and good luck to you with your podcast. But
Thanks,
thanks
man.
for giving us some time here. Obviously, before you go, I would like for you to give the listeners a sense for where they can find you, connect with you on social media, website, anything that you have, in case they want to reach out, maybe ask some questions, get some information from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, anybody that's listening, thank you so much for sticking around. Um, you know, Sometimes I don't, I wonder if what I'm saying. I think that's from anxiety. Sometimes I wonder if what I'm saying is actually holds any merit. So I appreciate that you have stuck around for this entire episode. If you want to connect, I am on Twitter, and that's Ryan C. Scott 1981. Just turned 40.
Oh
I'm
man,
also on Facebook.
by the
Yeah,
time this episode comes out, I will have as well.
man, I'm gonna tell you, I'm excited about my 40s. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. You can check out the Big Ed Idea podcast. It is on Spotify, iTunes, and various other platforms. I would appreciate a listen, a subscribe, feedback. I 120% um, believe in the 1% rule. So, 1% every day I can only grow 1%. So my podcast can only go run can only grow 1% every episode. So send me some feedback and I would love to improve. But yeah, thank you for listening.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, man. Good luck to you in your work and the second half of the school year at this point. So we'll finish strong. I don't know what school is going to look like for how much longer it's going to look like that, but keep up the good work.
Thank you, bud. Appreciate you.